The third meeting of the third committee of the 73rd session of the General Assembly is called to order. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to continue its general discussion under Agenda Item 28 entitled Social Development and its sub-items A, B, and C. Before we begin our general discussion, I would like to remind delegations of the time limit of 5 minutes for individual delegations. To assist the speakers in managing their time, a digital speech timer was installed, which is visible on the large screens in the room. The microphones will be automatically switched off when the time is up. Also, as you know, we have a rolling order, so I expect all the speakers to be available in their time as listed. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Israel.
My name is Paulina Kempinski. I'm 22, and I'm proud to be here as the Israeli Youth Delegate. As a daughter of a Jewish family originating from a former Soviet Union, I grew up hearing stories from my family members. Stories about how different their lives were, about the everyday struggles. The stories I found most upsetting were the ones about the opportunities that they didn't have. One such story was the story of my mother being denied the opportunity to learn how to swim. Why? My mother was what we would consider somehow chubby child. In the former Soviet Union, people were allowed to take swimming lessons only if they had the potential of becoming professional athletes. She didn't show the potential they were looking for. Another story of an even more upsetting nature was about my father being turned away from the university of his dreams, despite being a straight-A, extremely talented student, just because he's Jewish. My parents were denied these opportunities because they were living in a world in which things like gender, race, and sexual orientation mattered most. I, on the other hand, got the opportunities my parents didn't have, thanks to Israel's democratic nature. I got to learn how to swim. I got to go to the university of my dreams. I get to express my opinions freely, to believe in myself, to have people telling me that the only limit is the sky. This year, as a university student, I got to participate in a project named Young Women Politicians. This project was founded by an Israeli young journalist, a woman, who felt that women weren't represented enough in the decision-making process. Its goal is to encourage and strengthen young women to take part in the different stages of the decision-making process. The participants of this incredible project got to meet women who decided to take matters into their own hands. We met women who were involved in politics, both on the national and the local levels. We got to meet economists, researchers, diplomats, women who founded NGOs, and many others. We got to ask them questions. We got to get involved. We got to understand how things work. One thing I learned from this project is that the story of my parents as Jews in the former Soviet Union is a part of a bigger story, one that has everything to do with questions of gender, gender equality, LGBTI rights, and young people's rights. I learned that the world that I want to see is a world in which inclusion is not a privilege, but a given, in which the answer to questions like, does gender, sexual orientation, or race influence the opportunities that I get, is a very simple no. This room is filled with youth delegates, people that grew up in the 21st century, a generation of social media users, a generation in which diseases that were once lethal would just get you a week's break from school. We are the generation that has the freedom to look at questions of gender and sexual orientation and refer to them as simply irrelevant. A generation that is able to put aside the prejudice and judgment of previous centuries in order to treat people with respect, in order to give ourselves and the generations to come the opportunities that they deserve. We are the generation that shouldn't be fighting for women's rights and LGBT rights, but should see them as the natural way of the world. Thank you.
I thank Israel. I now give the floor to Romania.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Andrada and I are honored to represent the Romanian youth at the United Nations. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Romanian Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Permanent Mission of Romania to the United Nations for their unreserved and unconditional support. Our long-lasting endeavors, focusing on the well-being of young people, prompted us to engage in an extended analysis of their daily burdens. Akin to the former youth delegates, our surveys revealed that although the status quo improved over the last few years, the Romanian youth are still confronting the same challenges they did in the past. Education, civic engagement, and employment are the main concerns of those questioned. In extenso, specific training and opportunities should be provided in order for young people to get involved in problem solving at local and national level. Educational institutions must promptly adapt curricula for the purpose of improving the labor market relevance of their training. And leaders have to put the youth at the center of their policies with the aim of nurturing a milieu conducive to the development of young people. As youth delegates, we strive for a better political representation of the aforementioned group through youth advisory councils, for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, and for a nationwide framework capable of reducing early school leaving, of increasing participation in early education, and of fostering comprehensively developed and well-balanced human beings. Furthermore, our mission will be to curtail stereotypes, stigmas, and myths based on and related to ethnicity, race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and disability status. Nowadays, we neither live in the brightest day nor in the darkest nights, but more than ever, it is required to understand that the progress of youth represents the progress of humankind, and young leaders, governments, NGOs, and international organizations must act together in perfect unity in order to build a prosperous and sustainable future. Now I'll give the floor to my colleague.
Thank you. Our lifestyle is in a constant change. Many of the jobs we do now are not the same we did 20 years ago, and many of them won't be the same in the next two decades. Primary education is not only meant to prepare children for a future job, because we do not know what to train them for. Education is meant to develop them for life. We have to make sure that the forthcoming generations have and will possess the capacity to adapt to an ever-changing social and economic environment. In a world where the discrepancy between urban and rural, between rich and poor, and between privilege and disadvantages is so substantial, we have to make sure that the education is focused mainly on creating skills such as creative and critical thinking, adaptability, time management, decision-making, and of course, conflict resolution. In other words, not only hard skills play a significant role in one's personal development, but also soft skills must be encouraged. We need to learn how to cope with the new life challenges, and what we have to do is to assure the equality of chances and to adapt to educational system by changing the teaching methods and bring it up to date. This is an emblematic year for Romania. We celebrate 100 years since the Great Union took place. In the year of the centenary, we reflect on the past events and we calibrate so that we can thrive in the future. Even though transgenerational issues, conflicts might sometimes be considered an issue, I think that actually this year is more about generations coming along and build together, because we actually share the same goal, having a homogeneous, balanced, safe, and healthy life. This is the time we need to start to win back the trust in each other, and the time we have to work together instead of working apart. This is one of the main desires Romanian youth have expressed, to be given the chance to be part of building the future. We won't be competitive in 1 month, but in 10 years, we will feel the future and the difference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Romania. I now give the floor to Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. My name is Syra Lozano. I am a youth delegate from Mexico, but I have lived in the United States since I was 5 years old. I am what's known a dreamer. México se dirige esta comisión.
I'm addressing this committee on behalf of Mexico as the youth delegate for this General Assembly. More than 37 million young people live in Mexico. Like the rest of Mexican society, we acknowledge that the 2030 Agenda is a watershed in the work both of the organization and for development programming at the country level. That is why it is so important for us to share our realities, concerns and aspirations directly to this committee. Governments, including that of Mexico, are aligning their strategies to the 2030 Agenda and to try to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. The issue of social development, which was conceived of many moons ago, includes issues on young people, family, older persons and persons with disabilities. However, we continue to talk about these groups in an isolated way, as though the 2030 Agenda hadn't been adopted at all. In reality, none of these issues under this particular item can be understood without the coordination that we are building. Young persons, families, older persons and persons with disabilities are all cross-cutting actors to which the entire 2030 Agenda is geared. Last week, in the general debate, we heard many speakers expressing their strong desire for consistency and efficiency in the organization. Domestically, we have made progress to make sure that our inclusion strategy is comprehensive and in line with the 2030 Agenda. Is it not time for the UN also to be consistent and to discuss issues in the appropriate forum? It's clear that our discussions overlap with those of the second committee, ECOSOC, the High-Level Political Forum, and the Commission on Social Development. What is the point of repeating the same statement in 5 different fora? My delegation appeals once again for consistency. We know that the 2030 Agenda considers development as the fundamental fulcrum for the entire organization's agenda. Chairman, Mexico aims to provide all of its people with equal opportunities in the domains of healthcare, security, education, housing, basic services and the labor market. Building more prosperous societies hinges on the extent to which groups such as migrants, indigenous peoples, and people with disabilities are able to claim and uphold their human rights. Sometimes the best way to leave no one behind is to ensure that they are at the forefront of action. The National Strategy for Inclusion has made it possible for us to make progress in fighting poverty and to ensure that the rights enshrined in our Constitution and the international treaties to which we are party are fully upheld. The National Institute for Older Persons, INAPAM, has established public-private alliances with socially responsible businesses that support strategies to prevent and limit harm against older persons. It is important that we foster active, healthy, and dignified aging. For young people, it is equally important that we promote affirmative action to promote the cross-cutting perspective of youth in institutions, to ensure that young people can be seen as subjects of rights and agents of development. The Citizens' Council for Monitoring Public Policies, or CONCEP, promotes the participation of young persons in areas of political and social relevance, as well as the planning of initiatives that foster the participation of young people. Furthermore, our National Programme for Equality and Non-Discrimination clearly stipulates that there is a range of different families making up our country's society. That is why Mexico has rolled out public policies that respect sexual and gender diversity through campaigns that recognize all structures. The microphone has been cut off.
I thank Mexico. I now give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, let me thank and commend the Secretariat for the report A/73214, which allows for our discussion about inequality to be better informed and evidence-based. Mr. Chair, more than 1 billion people were lifted out of extreme poverty between 1990 and 2013. The goal of eliminating it by 2030 looks achievable. Inequality among and within countries, on the other hand, is growing. Average GDP per capita increased in the past 30 years, but the gap between the lowest and the highest income countries widened. Gains from technology and trade have been unevenly distributed. The richest percentile have accumulated a much larger proportion of growth than the wealth and the poor. Since 1980, wealth has been transferred from public to private ownership in nearly all countries. International organizations, member states, and civil society partners, both from developed as well as developing countries, need to pay more attention to the issue and coordinate efforts to reverse that trend. Mr. Chair, vulnerable groups are especially impacted by income inequality and unequal availability of social service. Exclusion manifests itself through age, gender, rural or urban status, disability, race, and migratory status. Women are paid less, more subject to unemployment, and do most of the domestic work. As a result, there are inequalities of income and wealth. A similar story could be told of people of African descent and other vulnerable groups. By fighting socioeconomic inequality, we are promoting human rights. By promoting equal access to education, healthcare, pensions, safe drinking water, sanitation, transportation, housing, and digital technology and services, we provide an incentive for quality inclusive growth. Mr. Chair, the UN and the international community have a unique opportunity to tackle the challenges posed by an increasing level of inequality. The third committee will discuss a resolution about the implementation of the World Summit on Social Development. The Fifth Seventh Commission of Social Development will have inequality as its priority theme. The 63rd Commission on the Status of Women will focus on social protection. The HLPF will review SDG 10 next summer. The high-level week showed that we are living through a delicate political and economic context in the world. Rising inequality might be contributing to internal and international social unease. Bear in mind how connected and interdependent we all are, it's high time that all of us react in a collective and a coordinated manner. The UN system and its agencies, the World Bank, ICLAC, and other economic regional commissions, have a pool of the very best specialists and the very best data. There are many reports being produced and issued about inequality. We have identified the problem, and we know we have a wide range of technical measures available. It's high time we engage politically with this issue at the UN with the urgency and detail it deserves. Let us come together to guarantee we are moving towards a more inclusive national and international socio-economic environment. I thank you.
I thank Brazil. I now give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairman. Colombia understands that international frameworks for development, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, are interrelated instruments which are indivisible and which are mutually reinforcing to ensure both human rights for vulnerable groups and sustainable development, focused on leaving no one behind. While the agenda is a broad development framework, we need to acknowledge that other international agendas, such as the Copenhagen Declaration and its Plan of Action, contain equally transformatory commitments which cannot be replaced in our efforts to achieve sustainable development at a global level. Hence, The United Nations system must make progress in identifying synergies and the potential of its work, allowing for the various agendas on development to converge and reach specific tangible results in the domain of development. This message is crucial, bearing in mind the ongoing process to reposition the United Nations development system. Colombia also believes that it's very important for discussions on poverty in the context of social development go beyond a monetarist viewpoint of the phenomenon and focus on the multiplicity of elements that are relevant, such as inequality, the lack of education, access to dignified housing, including many other important elements. Thank you.
I thank Colombia. I now give the floor to Norway.
Chair, distinguished delegates, it's an honor to be here today and to speak to you as youth on behalf of Norway. As we mark the 17th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the world has never seen a larger youth population. Yet young people's potential is hindered by violations of their fundamental rights every single day. Chair, more than 400 million young people live in areas affected by conflict, forcing many to flee from their homes. Climate change and conflict are key drivers of the rise in world hunger, causing pressure on food security. Multiple forms of malnutrition coexist, affecting children and young people the most. Addressing food security and malnutrition cannot be business as usual, but requires a holistic and conflict-sensitive approach for sustaining peace. Child early and forced marriages are a growing danger for girls living in conflict areas and refugee communities. Each year, 12 million girls are married before the age of 18. This amounts to 23 girls every minute, nearly 1 every 2 seconds. By empowering girls through realizing their rights to health, education, and equal opportunity, all member states can ensure that young girls become champions of change in their own communities. Half of the world's young people who do not go to school live in areas affected by conflict. Schools are systematically shut down, depriving young people access to education and making them more vulnerable to violence and armed groups' recruitment. Therefore, we call on all member states to protect schools from being used as a strategic target in conflict. Young people are targeted by groups waging war and using violent extremist tactics. The extent and depth of trauma they suffer at the hands of armed groups threatens to create a lost generation. Often seen as a source of conflict, young people today have never been more dynamic and engaged, showcasing their potential as much more than a victim of conflict.
Chair, Resolutions 2250 and 2419 have for the first time put youth's participation in issues of peace and security on the international agenda. Seen as a problem and a potential risk factor, children and youth are now recognized as positive and important change makers in conflict resolution and peace-building processes. Yet, this new narrative of children and youth is not recognized in all processes and decisions, highlighting a sense of conflict for many young people's life across the world. Of all children born each year, 1.7% are born with sex traits that do not fit typical definitions of male and female. Intersex people are often subject to irreversible surgery without the opportunity to make an informed decision. Therefore, we call on all member states to put an end to such interventions to realize intersex people's rights to physical integrity, health, privacy, and autonomy. All people, irrespective of sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity, are entitled to enjoy the protections provided by law, including respect of rights to life, security of person and privacy, and the right to be free from discrimination. We urge all member states to enable LGBTIQ people to exercise the same human rights as all people and to report regularly on the status of their rights. Young people's participation in public life is frequently restricted, depriving them from meaningful participation in decisions and processes that have profound implications of their own future. Therefore, we urge all member states to invest in youth, enabling them to participate and have their voice heard in politics and decision-making. Chair, distinguished delegates, member states. Today, we recognize young people as a source of peace rather than conflict. It is time to make young people part of the solution, enabling them to shape a better future for all. Thank you.
I thank Norway. I now give the floor to Germany.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, fellow youth delegates. We speak in our own capacity, but not for ourselves. Instead, we speak on behalf of more than 10 million young people living in Germany. When meeting young people all over Germany, they ask us to deliver some questions to all of you. We invite you to take a moment to think for yourself how you would answer them. Did you include the youth's perspective on the topics that this committee deals with? Do decision makers in your country consult with youth regularly? Is participation open to all young people in your country, regardless of their ethnic, educational, and financial background, and regardless of whether they live in a city or in a rural area? Does a youth delegate program exist in your country? And is there a youth delegate today sitting next to you? If you were able to answer all of these questions with a clear yes, young people in your country have amazing opportunities to participate. If you, on the contrary, answered one or more of these questions with no, youth participation still has the potential to grow in your country. As a matter of fact, youth participation has not yet gained the importance in every member state that it should to secure the meaningful inclusion of young people into society. With 1.8 billion young people living on this planet, we are the biggest age group of all. This means that sustainable development, lasting peace, and the enjoyment of human rights for all can only be achieved when we are involved. Involving youth requires well-structured and transparent mechanisms like those proposed in the recently launched UN Youth Strategy. We especially appreciate the idea of introducing youth advisory boards within UN entities to serve as a platform for the ideas of youth. This will be a great step toward international processes in which involving youth is a given. Nothing about us without us.
Mr. Chair, the usual killer phrase against youth participation is the argument of us simply being too young or inexperienced to be involved. What this argument neglects, though, is that the best solutions are not necessarily found by those who have studied the most or lived the longest. Good solutions often only require creativity and passion for change. These attributes do not depend on age. There are topics that affect youth disproportionately strongly. For example, education or youth unemployment. Still, it would be wrong to reduce us to these classical youth topics. Let us assure you, we are much more than that. When asking youth about their priorities, the topics range from closing the gender pay gap to ensuring access to water for all and creating more inclusive societies, just to name a few. Our perspective on these issues is as unique as the perspective of any other group and must be taken into account to find solutions that benefit all. The UN Youth Delegate Program is an important mechanism to bring a global youth perspective to the UN. But still, we are disappointed to see that this year, only 20% of the member states are sending youth delegates. This is not enough to ensure a good geographic representation of the world's youth. We therefore would like to encourage all member states to establish UN Youth Delegate programs and to involve their youth delegates meaningfully. Not only equal geographic representation, but also inclusiveness of youth participation is of high importance. Youth is often perceived as one homogeneous group, but this does not reflect reality. Young people can be well educated or illiterate, disabled or healthy, living in rural areas or metropolises. When talking about making youth participation possible, we should always add, for all. Meaningful youth participation must reflect the diversity of youth. Let us work towards a world in which everyone in this room can answer the question stated at the beginning with a clear yes. Nothing about us without us. We thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Germany. I now give the floor to Dominican Republic.
Señor Presidente,
Chairman, I would like to express to you and other members of the Bureau our congratulations on your election, and I would like to wish you all the best of success as you go about your work. Our delegation aligns itself with the statements made by Egypt on behalf of the G77 and China, and Guatemala on behalf of the group of friends of older persons. Chairman, the Dominican Republic has developed programs and policies which contribute to eradicating poverty and inequality. Investing in education, healthcare, and employment for young people are pillars of this national effort to break the circle of poverty. In this regard, we have been undertaking a serious exercise to align our work with national and international instruments, that is to say, the various conventions that we have ratified, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the National Development Strategy, and the National Planning System, so that we ensure that all of our work goes in the same direction for the well-being of our people, principally by strengthening the process for full inclusion of the most vulnerable parts of our country's population. Chairman, the Youth Ministry in the Dominican Republic has rolled out various programs to establish a forum to ensure the full development of young people. This is done by promoting the social participation of young people as a way of building global citizens, by fostering an entrepreneurial culture, as well as ensuring inclusion and equity. We also have a program entitled Let Us Speak of Everything in the Dominican Republic. This offers guidance to young persons in the domain of bullying, gender and sexuality issues, STIs, gender violence, teenage pregnancy, and many other important matters. We are in favor of greater participation of young persons in the decision-making process, not only those who are directly linked to this part of the population. Chairman, for our President, Danilo Medina, education remains one of the main public policies that he has been focusing on. We have made significant progress during his tenure, and we have been able to lay the foundations to ensure access to and quality of education, focusing on the excellence of education in the Dominican Republic, building a safe and fair country, education with lower levels of inequality and a more efficient and effective system. The government's commitment to ensure the training and well-being of teachers, which is very important if we are to enhance the quality of learning for boys, girls, adolescents within the educational system, has also been a priority. Hence, we have created the Digital Republic program to promote the inclusion of ICTs in productive educational and state processes. We have also ensured that we have the challenge of including all students within the entire system to, in other words, to lower the dropout rate and to ensure that we can provide the best possible training for democratic subjects to transform our material, social and cultural reality. Chairman, we have also been drafting public policies that are geared towards ensuring active, productive, participatory and protected older persons. We therefore have 93% of older persons who are covered through the National Health Coverage System. And we have a network of carers who ensure that those persons can be cared for in their households, those who are dependent on such care. We have developed a system for care for older persons in situations of emergencies and disasters, and we also have the AMA program, which cares for older persons who are living in poverty. The Dominican Republic continues to increase its commitment to persons with disabilities. We have the National Accessibility Plan, for example. The microphone has been cut off.
I thank Dominican Republic. I now give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States champions social development and the empowerment of social groups through government policies and programs at the domestic and international levels. These groups, including older persons, youth, and persons with disabilities, participate in UN fora, demonstrating their ability to make significant contributions to broader society. The United States has documented our dynamic efforts for social development on various websites and in our detailed responses to UN questionnaires. Rather than outlining specific national efforts, today I will speak on how the United Nations can best promote social development. The Secretary General's reform agenda calls for eliminating overlap and duplication among UN bodies and structuring UN institutions so that they augment the UN's existing efforts. Since the Commission's establishment over 70 years ago, other UN bodies, mechanisms, and frameworks have come into being which examine the same topics it considers in a more thorough and effective way. These include the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the High-Level Political Forum, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, and the Conference of States Parties on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Given the existence and continuing work of these high-profile bodies and processes, we need to ask whether the Commission is still able to provide added value to debate on these subjects. The annual CSOC-D sessions have a standing agenda item on the improvement of the Commission's future organization and methods of work. As long as the CSOC-D continues in its current role, and as member states continue their efforts to strengthen the Commission, the United States offers the following recommendations to improve its performance in the near term. First, we favor shorter annual sessions. A 10-day meeting is not needed because member states start negotiating draft resolutions before a session begins. 2 to 4 days are sufficient for hearing prepared statements discussing the main theme and acting on negotiated documents. Second, we propose eliminating multiple recurring resolutions and having a single negotiated document on the annual main theme. Member states should strive to make the document action-oriented to effect meaningful improvements in people's lives, a main objective of social development. Various UN commissions, including the Commission on the Status of Women, have successfully used this approach to consider a topic comprehensively and give attention to emerging issues. Third, the CSOC-D should reduce its number of reports, which are resource-intensive and which duplicate work being done elsewhere. Documentation for the 2018 session included reports on the 2030 Agenda, older persons, and persons with disabilities. A report on the World Summit for Social Development mentioned in detail these groups, as well as indigenous peoples and children. Reports with similar analysis and conclusions are already being prepared through the UN system. Our proposed reforms are consistent with our recommendations for making the work of the UN General Assembly and ECOSOC more efficient and effective, including seeking to reduce the number of reports, conferences, and negotiations by 50%. We ask member states to give these proposed reforms serious consideration. At the same time, member states should also seriously reflect on whether a standalone commission for social development at an estimated overall cost of over $15,000, including staffing costs, is necessary. We should give it thought to whether other UN bodies and processes can handle the issues it considers more effectively and with better results. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the United States. I now give the floor to Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to introduce Sweden's youth delegate to the United Nations, Mr. Hamza Ibrahim, who will make a statement to the third committee in his own capacity.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, fellow youth delegates, today I address you in my own capacity, as well as on behalf of 500,000 young Swedes engaged in 82 different organizations. I will bring your attention to a few issues close to their hearts: youth participation in peace and security efforts and protection of human rights for refugees and migrants. Today's generation of young people is the largest the world has ever known. 1 in 3 people alive is under the age of 30, and around 90% of young people are living in developing countries, mainly in Africa and Asia. In Yemen, for example, a least developed country experiencing a major conflict right now, 46% of the population is under 16. Yemeni youth, just as youth all over the world, have hopes and dreams which cannot be fulfilled in a nation at war. Peace is badly needed for development. The maintenance of international peace and security must encompass a variety of stakeholders. Despite youth being a large part of the world population, we are not often able to contribute or be the subject of the discourse. Youth should play a role as a positive agents of change, building sustainable peace in their societies. To utilize this tremendous potential of young people in creating and maintaining peaceful environments, we must be engaged with and provided opportunities to be involved in decision-making at all levels. At the same time, youth is often in a vulnerable situations in society, which requires mechanisms that can protect us from violent conflict and to live in a safety without fear of our personal and collective security. Mr. Chair, 68.5 billion people around the world have been forced to leave their homes. Among those, close to 25.4 million are refugees, which over 50% are under the age of 18. In addition to the traditional drivers of forced displacement, such as persecution and armed conflict, people are forced to leave their homes for a variety of complex reasons, including poverty, lack of access, health services, education, water, food, and due to the consequences of environmental degradation and climate change. Migration is not criminal, and migrants in irregular situations should not be treated as criminals in the absence of safe pathways for migration. Many migrants are compelled to enter and stay in countries of destination irregularly, and as a consequence, are exposed to risk of abuse, exploitation, and even torture and death by a range of perpetrators, including corrupt state officials and traffickers. Children must never be detained because of their parents' migration status. It goes against the best interest of child and is a clear violation of the rights of the child and causes harm that is amount to torture. At the same time, anti-immigration sentiments and racism is growing in many countries, which make the need for advocacy and giving voiceless a voice more important. In December 2018, world leaders will convene in Morocco to finalize the Global Compact on Migration. This is a milestone moment, and we want to make sure that the voice of migrants and children and youth are being heard. Today, I may not only have these few minutes, but young people have a lot to say, and I will recommend all of you to listen. We have to do this together. To conclude, therefore, on behalf of 500,000 young Swedes, I urge the nations in this assembly to implement the UN Security Council Resolution 2250 and 2419, and to strongly commit to the value to protect the human rights of refugees and migrants. Thank you.
I thank Sweden. I now give the floor to El Salvador.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. El Salvador aligns itself with the statements made by Egypt on behalf of the G77 and by Guatemala on behalf of the Group of Friends of Older Persons. El Salvador would like to express its staunch commitment to achieve social inclusion and integration as one of the 3 basic and interdependent dimensions of social development. In this regard, since 2017, El Salvador has had a strategy to eradicate extreme poverty. This gathers together a range of interinstitutional and intersectoral work within public policies that aim to create synergies to improve the impact on the living standards of the poorest families, and to do this in a sustainable manner by building up the social fabric and ensuring that a rights-based approach is applied. Chairman, we know that poverty affects different people at different times throughout their lives, particularly persons or groups who are especially vulnerable or marginalized, including women and girls, indigenous peoples, children, young persons, persons with disabilities, older persons, and the LGBTI community. They are very often excluded from the achievements of national and international development, and they remain subjects of discrimination and social exclusion. That is why we believe that the fight against poverty, inequality, and exclusion under the vision provided by the 2030 Agenda must be carried out with a universal and holistic approach, thus considering the specific needs of all vulnerable groups. El Salvador recognizes the multiple dimensions of poverty and the need to tackle its root causes. The 2030 Agenda acknowledges this paradigm shift when it calls upon us to eradicate poverty in all of its forms and to reduce inequalities. Chairman, El Salvador has strengthened initiatives that allow young people to acquire different skills, and they have been provided with support through training and the provision of seed money, through the provision of scholarships and bonuses for education to ensure that they have opportunities to get back into the educational system, those who have previously dropped out of school. One of the issues that significant progress is being made on is to reduce the teenage pregnancy rate. We have launched a national strategy to prevent teenage pregnancies. We have also been undertaking significant efforts in terms of education in sexual and reproductive health and those rights, which are linked to the full exercise of young persons' rights, such as the campaign which we have rolled out to try and reduce teenage pregnancies. In the case of older persons, we are pleased to share with you that El Salvador in December 2017 ratified the Inter-American Convention on the Rights of Older Persons. This is an instrument that will guide our public policies to promote and protect the rights of this part of our population. We would like to reaffirm our commitment to promote the human rights of older persons, and we would be grateful to see further progress on the discussions on a possible international legal instrument which would promote, protect, and uphold the full enjoyment of rights for older persons on an equal footing without any discrimination and with equal opportunities. We would also like to express our commitment to actively promote the full inclusion, integration, and civil, social, political, economic, and cultural participation of persons with disabilities. We recognize that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a crucial instrument for their human rights and for their development. I would like to conclude by reiterating El Salvador's commitment to ensure the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms of all citizens without leaving anybody behind, and our commitment to work with the international community to tackle the existing challenges so as to fulfill the ideal contained in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
I thank El Salvador. I now give the floor to Kazakhstan.
Thank you. Distinguished Chair, distinguished delegates and colleagues. Agenda 2030 was adopted in 2015. With each session of the General Assembly, it is our obligation to reach more effectively the 17 goals of this new paradigm shift. The ambitious but necessary goals of Agenda 2030 will need numerous resources. Therefore, Kazakhstan proposed at the 70th session of the UN General Assembly that each state should consider allocating annually 1% of defense budget of the UN Special Fund for Sustainable Development. We thus call for implementing the recommendations of the Addis Ababa Plan of Action related to financing for development, together with support from the World Bank, regional banks, and the engagement of regional organizations. In spite of the downwards spiraling of global economic trends, Kazakhstan has increased social support and protection by annually enlarging its financing for children, youth, women, elderly, and persons with disabilities. Our national strategy, Kazakhstan 2050, and the economic policy of Nurlizhol, financed by the National Fund, will guarantee higher quality education, healthcare, affordable social housing, and enhanced social security. Kazakhstan believes that disability must be given national, regional, and global recognition as a human rights issue. In 2016, we ratified the relevant UN convention, though we had already adopted the law on the social protection of people with disabilities. We are presently effectively nearing completion of the National Action Plan 2012-2018, which has opened new horizons with a greater accessibility and inclusion of persons with disabilities and have envisaged new services for the coming years. In order to eliminate poverty among people with disabilities, Kazakhstan operates a three-tiered system of social security, from basic to compulsory and the additional. We also have a program of employment of persons with disabilities under the Employment Roadmap 2020, which is a program of active measures for job creation and employment. In 2018, the government will provide funding for employers to subsidize the creation of special jobs for persons with disabilities with a mandate quota system. In Kazakhstan, older persons constitute as much as 10% of the population. We promote the concept of active aging as well as ensure that our elderly enjoy full rights without any distinction or discrimination so that they can live with dignity and safety. As a responsible member state, Kazakhstan has offered to host the UN Regional Hub in Almaty with a view to promote sustainable development, humanitarian assistance, and build resilience nationally and regionally in Central Asia. My country aspires to fulfill the objectives of the United Nations by consistently translating aspires to fulfill them into national policies and programs and take others in the region along with it. We have also provided, in equal partnership with African countries and UNDP, capacity building for 45 ministries of foreign affairs in the region. We have, with the help of ISCAP, developed biogas projects for seeds to assist their transition to a green economy. As the largest landlocked country in the world, Kazakhstan has promoted the advance of LDCs, especially in Eurasia, to overcome their geographical disadvantages to land-linked. Energy is the driver for all SDGs, and we thus had organized Astana Expo 2017 on the theme Future Energy to showcase new renewable sources for the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Kazakhstan. I now give the floor to Paraguay.
Thank you, Chairman. My delegation aligns itself with the statement made by G77 and China, and the statement made by the Group of Friends of Older Persons. Chairman, we need to underscore the role of states in attaining the 2030 Agenda. We won't be able to achieve significant progress without a genuine commitment by all to achieve sustainable development. And we must always maintain the premise that this must be in all states and for all persons. In Paraguay, the 2030 Development Plan has been aligned to the SDGs. In addition, the three branches of the state have signed a commitment to the 2030 Agenda. For this, we have built an innovative participatory institutional architecture which is committed to attaining these targets and their goals. Chairman, we strongly believe that all persons deserve a dignified life. And that is why we are rolling out programs for inclusive development, progressively increasing social investment so as to include persons in poverty, particularly women, children, indigenous persons, older persons, and rural populations, who, as a result of structural causes, tend to be more greatly affected by these issues. The government that took office on the 15th of August will continue implementing the emblematic programs for social protection, such as the Tekopora program, which means living well. This includes conditional monetary transfers, the school nutrition program, pensions for older persons, and programs to reduce poverty by creating opportunities. I would also like to mention that with the desire to step up national work in the social domain, the government of President Mario Benitez has transformed the unit on social action to a ministry. The ministry's mission is now to coordinate work for social protection by implementing social projects and programs, focusing on those in poverty and extreme poverty. The Ministry for Social Development will focus a great deal on the implementation of coordinated work between public service providing institutions at the various levels of government with the active participation of civil society, and they will focus all of their efforts on promoting the effective and efficient implementation of the new social protection system. Chairman, Paraguay will continue working to ensure that all persons have a dignified life without discrimination, to ensure that they can enjoy the full realization of their economic, social, and cultural rights. We reaffirm our commitment to the 2030 Agenda and its goals, particularly the goal to eradicate poverty. And I also reiterate my delegation's willingness to work to move forward the work of this committee that you are chairing and to achieve the goals that we have set ourselves for this session. Thank you very much.
I thank Paraguay. I now give the floor to Indonesia. Sorry, Indonesia, is there anything wrong with the mic? Okay. You're okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Secretary General for preparing the reports under this agenda item. Indonesia wishes to associate itself with the statement delivered by the previous distinguished representative of G77 and China, as well as ASEAN. Many of the points highlighted in the reports and in this morning's introductory remarks resonated with Indonesia's views on social development. Indonesia fully agrees that development is meant to benefit all peoples of all backgrounds, regardless of gender and ethnicity, and regardless of age and ability. For Indonesia, development is not merely the sum of building roads, bridges, and skyscrapers. It is also about illuminating the hearts and minds of people, enabling shared growth so that we can prosper together and be healthy, productive, and for societies. For Indonesia, essentially, this is the essence of social development. At this juncture, Indonesia would like to reaffirm its commitment to the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development and its plan of action. We must put our energies together to solve social challenges that cannot be solved by domestic efforts alone. Partnership and international coordination is part of the solution. We need to systematically review and make coherent international commitments to eradicate poverty, provide full employment and decent work for all, social integration, and sustainable development. Mr. Chairman, Indonesia is committed to promote growth, to eradicate poverty, to realize the potential of all citizens, as well as to empower the people. In terms of poverty alleviation, Indonesia's strategy focuses on 3 areas. First, comprehensive social protection. Second, the provision and improved access to basic services. and third, sustainable livelihood. This has resulted in a decreased proportion of population living below the national poverty line from 11.75% in 2006 to 10.12% in 2017. We are aiming to provide the poverty rate down to 7% by 2019. On providing comprehensive social protection, one major effort is the implementation of the National Social Security System in health sector. In 2018, the number of beneficiaries has reached 195.2 million people, becoming one of the largest in the world. Social protection has also been expanded to the education, welfare, and employment sectors. Through the poverty reduction and social protection policies, Indonesia's ratio improved from 0.391 in September 2017 to 0.389 in March 2018. This has mainly been achieved through job creation and infrastructure development, while introducing new programs such as Smart Indonesia program to address education disparity. The program gives cash to poor students aged between 6 to 21 to ensure they complete school. As of October 2017, over 17.9 million smart cards have been distributed. The government has also revitalized vocational education. Industry players contributed to curriculum development for vocational and technical schools. Meanwhile, private companies will offer training and internship opportunities for students as well as teachers. This reform aims to develop skill sets that reflect market demand, thus further strengthening Indonesia's workforce. Finally, Mr. Chairman, on the issue of disabilities, Indonesia has been a party to the UNCRPD since 2011. In 2016, Law Number 8 on persons with disabilities was enacted. The law marks a significant movement, and it is not historical, in shifting national perspective towards movement with disabilities from social-based to human rights-based approach. Indonesia is also in the process of ratifying the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled. I thank you.
I thank Indonesia. I now give the floor to Poland.
Thank you. Mr. President, Poland aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union. I would like to add some additional remarks. Poland attaches great importance to the protection and promotion of family and family policies. In line with the main objective of the follow-up to the 20th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, Polish government enacted a number of family-oriented policies. A tangible proof of our commitment to this agenda is the program Family 500+, which was launched in 2016. Its purpose is to provide financial support for families bringing up children. The essence of the program is the payment of the benefit in the amount of 500 zloty per month to all families, regardless of their income, for the second and each subsequent child of the family. The families with a child with disability enjoy a higher benefit. As a result, the Family 500+ program contributes to both decline in poverty and the increase in number of births. Another initiative of Polish government aimed at the promotion of the family is the Good Start program, which is supporting the education of children. Support from the program is available in the form of one-time benefit for every child attending school. It helps the family in the expenses related to the start of the school year. The program recognizes as well the need for special support for children with disabilities. The benefit was introduced first time this year and covered 4.6 million children. Mr. President, the fight against poverty and social exclusion and the promotion of social integration is one of the main goals of Polish social policy. Social assistance plays an important role in this context, providing support to people and families who, using their own resources, are not able to overcome a difficult life situation. Social assistance benefits, including cash benefits, benefits in kind, and various services, are provided mainly at local level. Additional programs and initiatives are being implemented, aiming at inter alia, contracting homelessness, and strengthening participation in social and professional life of people socially excluded and at risk of exclusion. Mr. President, in conclusion, let me reiterate my country's full commitment to the realization of the implementation of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. We will continue to put the question related to the family contribution to social development high on our agenda. Mr. President, let me now pass the floor to the youth delegates.
Thank you. In our capacity as youth delegates of Poland, we have registered and reflected the needs of our peers. We have listened to their critical voices, and in most of them, we detected frustration related to unemployment. However, youth unemployment is not only the concern of Polish young adults. As we have heard during this committee, youth unemployment is widespread and structural in nature. Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, we cannot overestimate the difficulties that young people meet at their critical time of transition from school to labor market. Restrictive labor laws, discrimination, unpaid internships that provide few, if any, employment guarantees. The market is also changing faster than ever before, generating new demands for digital competence, soft skills, and highly specialized knowledge. Youth unemployment is a major negative factor for all parties, infringes personal development of young people, increases economic risks, and weakens political stability.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we must ensure inclusive economic growth and decent jobs for all, as set as in Agenda 2030 and UN Youth Strategy. Structural reforms should remove entry barriers and create effective connections between education and jobs. On the other hand, education should be adjusted to prevent job mismatch and enable students to adapt quickly to changing labor market conditions. In Poland, youth unemployment rate has recently fallen significantly faster than the world average. However, as our consultations have shown, we must do more. Youth are agents of change, a source of ideas and solutions. More must be done to tap these resources. We must therefore calling upon all member states to work closely together to respond to the challenges in the critical transition time from school to labor market. We believe that the new UN Youth Strategy to engage and empower young people may serve this purpose as an effective instrument for sustainable change. Thank you.
I thank Poland. I now give the floor to Ecuador.
Gracias. Thank you, Chairman. We align ourselves with the statements made by Egypt on behalf of the G77 and Guatemala on behalf of the Group of Friends of Older Persons. Chairman, we believe that we need to define strategies to eradicate poverty in all of its dimensions and to achieve sustainable development for all without leaving anybody behind. After its adoption in 1995, the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development and its Plan of Action are still more relevant than ever. Back then, the international community recognized the importance of eradicating poverty to achieve development, and this was then reaffirmed 20 years later in 2015 with the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Chairman, Ecuador is applying a multidimensional concept for development, sumak kausai, or living well, which means living with dignity and harmony with nature, in harmony with oneself and with other human beings, as well as being able to meet one's basic needs. It means living without the excesses of consumption. In my country, we have drafted a roadmap to define the state's work to benefit all throughout their lives through the National Development Plan 2017-2021 for an entire lifetime. This was drafted to protect the rights of priority groups in Ecuador with a comprehensive vision which takes inspiration from the various needs of persons throughout their life. Within this context, Ecuador has been working to achieve this equity for children. We have been working with programs on the ground, such as the Misión Ternura, which promotes equality in a context of shared responsibility and is focused on the early childhood. We also reiterate the need to strengthen the protection and full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for older persons. We need to continue building more equitable societies that prioritize the well-being of all members. In this regard, we are implementing the program called My Best Years. This aims to protect and uphold the well-being of vulnerable persons by offering them a dignified and healthy life. We believe that By drafting programs and policies and ensuring appropriate legal frameworks to allow for the full participation of older persons in the social, economic, cultural, civil and political life without any kind of restrictions, free from all forms of discrimination and violence, by doing that it will be possible to guarantee their dignity, their empowerment and their ability to fully claim their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Chairman, Ecuador is currently holding the chairmanship of the Bureau of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In this area, we have a national agenda for equality 2017-2021, which is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. For Ecuador, shared responsibility of all stakeholders in society for protecting human rights is of paramount importance. We aim to strengthen inclusion, solidarity and equality. That is our priority as a state, and it is part of our commitment to build a universal culture of peace. We believe that drafting public policies with a great social content allows us to talk about equal opportunities. We will continue to work in Ecuador to achieve a more inclusive society through an integral vision of our society to ensure social integration as well as access to services and benefits for all persons, particularly those who historically have been excluded. We believe that we need to broach this key issue within the commitment of leaving no one behind in the path towards sustainable development and to implement the 2030 Agenda. And we express our desire to use this forum to join together efforts to achieve a successful outcome which puts social development as the priority. I'll also allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate you, sir, on your election as chairman and to wish you the best of success. I would also like to extend these congratulations and wishes of success to other members of the Bureau. Thank you.
I thank Ecuador. I now give the floor to Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jamaica congratulates you and the Bureau on your election and thanks the Secretary General for the reports under this agenda item and notes the recommendations contained therein. My delegation aligns itself with the statements delivered by the delegations of St. Lucia on behalf of CARICOM and Egypt on behalf of the G77 and China and wishes to share some elements from the national perspective. Mr. Chair, greater investment in human capital leads to exponential returns for national development. In this regard, the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, JSIF, directs the investments towards pro-poor economic growth, developing a productive youth workforce, job creation, and stimulating increased earnings at the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise levels. As a result of this thrust, since 1996, approximately 1.4 million Jamaicans have benefited from the completion and delivery of over 1,687 projects targeting rural and agricultural development, health, education, and family development. Social protection is undoubtedly a critical policy tool for transformation and national development. Jamaica's 2014 National Social Protection Strategy is aimed at ensuring inclusion in all aspects of national development by combating inequality, poverty, and vulnerability in the society. The Poverty Reduction Agenda of Vision 2030 Jamaica, or National Development Plan that is aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, is crafted on the belief that each person should be provided with the opportunity and support needed to enjoy sustainable and good quality of life. Jamaica is currently updating its 1997 National Policy on Poverty and the National Poverty Reduction Program. The revised policy, which was tabled in Parliament in September 2017, seeks as its major outcome to eradicate extreme poverty by 2022 and reduce the national prevalence of poverty to significantly less than 10% in 2030. As one of the first 2 countries to ratify the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Jamaica reiterates its commitment to inclusion, integration, and empowerment for persons with disabilities and their contribution to national development. The government launched a national awareness campaign in November of last year to sensitize citizens to the provisions of the 2014 Disabilities Act. The national awareness campaign was spearheaded by the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, the organization created in 1973 to promote the independence and inclusion of persons with disabilities in every aspect of national life. Most recently, action has been taken through the 2018 Building Act to improve accessibility to buildings for persons with disabilities. Codes of practice are being developed to provide practical guidance on enhancing the level of participation of persons with disabilities. The codes of practice on education and training and on employment are slated for finalization at the end of this year. Regarding older persons, the government is now in the public consultation phase for revision to the 1997 National Policy for Senior Citizens, with expected completion before the end of this year. The policy will seek to strengthen protection for the elderly while underscoring the valuable contribution they make to national development efforts. A national registry of senior citizens will be developed to facilitate effective provision of social assistance and services and ensure that the elderly remain a visible segment of the Jamaican society as we promote intergenerational solidarity. The family is a fundamental institution and the main vehicle for building a cohesive society. Jamaica recognizes the importance of breaking the intergenerational cycle of poverty and as such has invested strategically in the health and education of poor households to move them from a state of welfare to a state of well-being. The Program of Advancement through Health and Education, PATH, is a key instrument in Jamaica's social protection framework, providing income support to poor families with direct benefits provided to an estimated 70% of families living below the national poverty line. Mr. Chair, despite the gains made in this area, Jamaica remains concerned with its limited ability to provide optimal levels of budgetary support for our social protection system. This results from our constrained fiscal space and associated high debt burden. We therefore reiterate the call for special attention to be given to the plight of highly indebted middle-income countries which lack the fiscal space to preserve the hard-won developmental gains that have been achieved, particularly those of a social dimension. In closing, Mr. Chair, my delegation is mindful of the numerous challenges that lay ahead in achieving our social development targets, both domestic and international. Jamaica remains hopeful, however, that collective will, at the global level, coupled with determined national action, will result in the eradication of poverty and the attainment of sustainable development for all our citizens. Mr. Chair, I finally close in thanking you.
I thank Jamaica. I now give the floor to Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like to congratulate you on your election to lead the work of this committee, and I would also like to congratulate the other members of the Bureau. You all have the full support of my delegation so that we can ensure a successful session. My delegation fully endorses the statements made by the distinguished delegation of Egypt, speaking on behalf of the G77 and China, and the statement given by the group of Friends on Aging. Chairman, inclusive social development and the eradication of poverty in all of its dimensions must be among the principal priorities of the organization, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. It is currently impossible to understand development without understanding its social dimension. Economic policies alone are not enough to generate profound long-term changes unless they include inclusion as a key component. It is therefore key that we conceive social development as a transformative process to ensure the full achievement of all economic, social, cultural, civil and political rights for all persons. The 2030 Agenda and the SDGs mark the course, given that the elimination of poverty cannot be achieved without considering the three dimensions of development: social, economic and environmental. Therefore, effective strategies to eradicate poverty in all of its forms and dimensions require innovation and integration of policies, combining the aforementioned three dimensions of sustainable development. In line with the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, Argentina understands that social policies must consider the complexity of poverty, not just from its material dimension, but also its human dimension, bearing in mind the upsurge of new various vulnerabilities. That is why Argentina's great challenge is to achieve the goal of zero poverty. This is our target, and this guides all of our work, all the work undertaken by the various ministries of the Argentinian government. The state therefore has a key role to play in implementing and designing a comprehensive social protection system which is universal, to ensure that people have their rights upheld throughout their lives, from early childhood to old age. We must also guarantee the inclusion, active participation, and access to the full exercise of human rights for older persons, young people, children, and adolescents as central actors of development. And we must also be mindful of the specific needs of vulnerable groups, which requires a permanent commitment to act on behalf of states. We need to ensure the implementation of policies that pinpoint the specific needs of persons with disabilities, so that they can play a full role in society, ensuring that their human rights are upheld. It is also crucial that we achieve genuine gender equality, empowering women who are dealing with situations of violence from a multi-sectoral approach by strengthening institutions and by bringing about cultural change. Argentina, under the slogan Building Consensus for Fair and Sustainable Development, took on the chairmanship of the G20 on the 1st of December 2017. During our presidency, the efforts undertaken by the Development Working Group are geared towards promoting inclusive economic growth, focusing on enhancing people's skills. The working group is focusing in particular on three areas: investing in children to ensure greater opportunities for them, ensuring inclusive businesses for those who are excluded from the system, and finally a sustainable habitat to ensure that basic rights for persons are upheld, including access to housing. The special protection of the rights of children and ensuring high-quality education for young people are crucial to achieve sustainable development. My delegation would also like to underscore the importance of making progress towards the full respect, promotion and protection of human rights of older persons by the development of a universal international binding instrument for the international community to ensure the full participation of older persons in the development of their societies, free from violence, discrimination, indifference, abuse, and mistreatment. Finally, I would like to underscore that the dignity and empowerment of persons. The microphone has been cut off.
I thank Argentina. I now give the floor to Georgia.
Mr. Chair, honorable delegates, made on Earth by humans. This is a secret message written in a circuit board of a fully electric Tesla car sent to space. The remarkable message gives us hope for the borderless societies of the future, where we won't be divided by what makes us different, but united by a simple feature. We are all humans, and this is our planet, the only home we have at the moment. And it is our responsibility to take care of it, using the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At a very young age, I realized that if you want to bring a positive impact to this world, you can start right away. You don't have to be a government official to make change. At the age of 14, I, along with other fellow Georgians, established a youth organization called Paint the World in Tbilisi, Georgia. This movement strives to unite young people with diverse cultural backgrounds with the idea of community service. We provide psychological support to people in crisis by implementing art therapy projects in hospitals, orphanages, hospices, elderly shelters, and centers for people with disabilities. The movement quickly expanded internationally, and together, our team channeled Paint the World to countries such as Georgia, UK, Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Oman, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Kingdom of Eswatini, South Africa, Kenya, Mozambique, and the US. I'm telling you this because if I, a girl from Tbilisi, Georgia, can do this just with a dream, imagine what we, as the world, can do if we put our resources together and follow our dreams to positively impact the world. Being a global citizen means that you get to see a bigger picture of our world. My experience gave me a strong understanding that the issues young people face around the world are in fact very similar. I have visited countries
and worked with many groups of youth. In different parts of the planet, I've seen poverty, crime, racism, child abuse, lack of basic education, lack of sanitation, but most of all, hopelessness. I've realized that we humans are doing something wrong. The youth of Georgia believe that loving our country requires more than just singing its praises or avoiding uncomfortable truth. It requires the occasional disruption, the willingness to speak up for what is right, to shake up the status quo. For this, we should hold our governments responsible for their actions. Globally, we need to make education our biggest priority and reshape our educational systems by effective implementation of youth policies. We need to transform educational systems so that every school will help children pursue their true passion and use their education to change, innovate, and progress. It is not enough to aim to create the generation of leaders. Leaders, if they don't have the right intentions, outrageously abuse their power. If we really want to put the SDGs in action, let's raise the generation of bold people who will have the courage to chase their dreams, who will be kind to one another, who will solve all international and regional conflicts in order to build a civilization that lives in harmony and lasting peace. Now is the time to break the vicious cycle and transform all challenges into opportunities. For that reason, we have established the Youth Movement for Reconciliation under the mandate of Georgia's Youth Delegate to the UN. We firmly support continuous efforts of the government of Georgia to their reconciliation with our Abkhaz and Ossetian brothers and sisters, and newly adopted state strategy, a step to a better future, aimed to provide to them the benefits of SDGs, such as high-quality education and economic growth. Dear colleagues, millions of people around the world lack the bright colors they need to show them that their own dream is possible. In Georgia and many other locations worldwide, I've seen places that are dull. I've met people who live gray lives. My friends and I have already painted the lives of thousands of people around the world, but there is still more to do. United as humans, we need to paint this world with bright colors of unity and peace. Because at the end of the day, color represents the way we live our lives. Let's walk the talk. It's time to live our lives in color, because we're all humans, and this is our planet. I thank you.
I thank Georgia. I now give the floor to China.
Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you on your election as the chair of the third committee. The Chinese delegation assures you of our full support. China aligns itself with a statement made by G77 and China. Development is essential in our world today. We need to address underdevelopment, but more importantly, imbalances in development. In his report by the Secretary General this year, he has emphasized on addressing such imbalances, and in respect, I would like to make the following observations. First, multilateralism must be upheld. All countries, while pursuing cooperation for win-win results, must preserve the rules-based international system with the UN at the core and the multilateral trading system centering on the WTO, promote economic globalization that is open, inclusive, balanced, and that can deliver benefits for all. It is important to respect each country's choice of development paths and the right to better lives and greater development opportunities. Second, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development must be implemented in a balanced way. Countries should integrate the 2030 Agenda into their national development strategies in light of their conditions and stage of development, and embark on a development path that is green, well-coordinated, open, inclusive, and brings benefits for all. International development partnerships need to be enhanced so as to promote international development cooperation with the UN at the core, North-South cooperation at the main channel, and supplemented by South-South cooperation. Third, inclusive social development must be ensured. Following a people-centered approach, all countries need to work to build a social security system that is universally accessible and sustainable, promote full employment, and create decent jobs so as to build inclusive societies. greater public fiscal investment are required to protect the legitimate rights and interests of vulnerable groups and narrow the gap between rich and poor so as to ensure that they share the fruits of development. Mr. Chair, China has always put our people at the center of our development to ensure that reform and development benefit our entire population in a fair way. This year marks the 40th anniversary of China's reform and opening up. Over the last 4 decades, China, in keeping with our own conditions, has charted a path of socialism with Chinese characteristics and achieved historical achievements in social development. Over 700 million people have been lifted out of absolute poverty, and by 2020, all those living in poverty in rural areas will be lifted above the poverty line. A primary healthcare insurance scheme has been instituted for 135 million people, together with a pension scheme benefiting over 900 million people. Thus, our people have gained a stronger sense of achievement, happiness, and security. China has been actively building a new platform for international cooperation, injecting new impetus into common development. The BRI is a public good that China has offered the world and has become the largest such platform. The BRI aims to deliver benefits for all through consultation and contribution. It is open, transparent, inclusive. It is based on international rules and laws. It advocates green, environment-friendly, and sustainable development. It aims to promote common development through greater complementarity among participating countries. By September this year, over 130 countries and international corporate and organizations have signed agreements on BRI cooperation with China. China is the largest developing country in the world. While developing itself, China has been actively assisting other developing countries in their development efforts. To date, China has provided nearly 400 billion RMB in development assistance to over 160 countries and international organizations. At the Beijing summit of China-Africa Cooperation Forum held this September, President Xi Jinping has announced 8 major initiatives to be implemented in the next 3 years and beyond in a bid to forge close partnership with Africa and promote common development and prosperity in China and Africa. These actions include green development, capacity building, healthcare, people-to-people exchanges. China stands ready with all countries to promote development, cooperation, and benefits for all, and jointly build a community with a shared future for all mankind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank China. I now give the floor to Ireland.
Thank you, Chair. We are the youth delegates from Ireland, representing 1.2 million young people, all of whom hope to inherit a stronger, safer, and more sustainable world. There is no doubt that this is a trying time for the international community. Conflicts, climate change, the large-scale movement of refugees, and political unrest threaten the human rights of all throughout the world, and young people are particularly vulnerable. The 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit and the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Peace Agreement in Ireland, gives us the chance to pause and reflect on how we can ensure that the human rights of all are met going into the future. The Sustainable Development Goals offer us a roadmap to be the generations for change that build a better world. Young people are the experts on our own needs and lived realities. Governments must invest in initiatives that support young people in exercising their agency, leadership, and voice. Involving youth is not a photo op. It requires a commitment to engaging young people at all levels of policy development, decision-making, and implementation. The threat of climate change particularly impacts young people. Across the world, the frequency and intensity of severe weather events continues to increase. We cannot allow this to become our new normal. Millions of young people across the globe are doing our very best to mitigate against climate change, to create a world that is safe for all of us. But we cannot do it alone. We need all generations to do their very best as well. Girls and women account for over half of the population, and yet our priorities, rights, and aspirations remain on the sidelines. Patriarchal practices and norms continue to discriminate against us, jeopardising our safety and making it more difficult for us to access quality healthcare and education, decent work and equal pay. We are proud of Ireland's role as chair of the Commission on the Status of Women. Young people in Ireland believe that gender equality is not a gift to be granted, but rather a fundamental right. Achieving full gender equality by 2030 requires comprehensive legislative and societal changes that recognise the specific needs of girls and young women. If we are truly committed to leaving no one behind, we must engage with young people to work together as a global community to be the generations for change that achieve the SDGs.
We draw particular attention to Article 25.1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees an adequate standard of living, health, housing and social security for all. For many of the world's people, these rights have yet to be fully realised. Unacceptable numbers of young people are not in education, employment or training. This is not by choice. Governments must improve their efforts on planning, supporting and delivering on targeted education and labour activation programmes. It is unacceptable that a young person's education should be dictated by the circumstances of their birth. It should instead be reflective of their boundless potential and cater to their unique needs. Today, in developed countries, there are children and young people who suffer through poverty, inadequate accommodation and homelessness. The life chances of these young people are being lost. The ultimate objective of governments should be to provide the necessary infrastructure and services to ensure well-being of young people and empower them to break the cycle of poverty and to become agents of change in their lives and the lives of their families and communities. Rural communities are losing generation after generation of young people who have no choice but to leave for education, employment and social services. Society needs increased action on regional and rural development in order to build more inclusive, resilient and sustainable communities for all. It is more important now than ever that governments use the fruits of their prosperity toward the betterment of humanity and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Part of this requires an extensive education agenda to enhance knowledge and engagement by all members of society in development education and human rights education. In today's globalized world, we must live in each other's shelter and not in each other's shadow. With the publication of the United Nations Youth Strategy, Youth 2030, we call on UN member states and civil society to take radical steps to deliver on this, working with and for young people to be the generation for change. Young people make up 25% of the world's population today, but they make up 100% of the future. It is with this in mind that we call for a world in which the human rights of every young person are realised, that ensures every young person is empowered to achieve their full potential, and that recognises young people's agency, resilience, and their boundless ability to be positive agents for change. Gurv Margaret, thank you.
I thank Ireland. I now give the floor to Afghanistan.
Mr. Chair, my fellow delegates, it's an honor to address this assembly. Today's topic of discussion is of immense importance to my country. Not only is social development a priority for the Afghan government, but the young generation of Afghanistan is at its forefront. I come from a generation that has risen from the destruction, but we are committed to constructively contribute to our society. Mr. Chair, we have lost so much to the protracted conflict and terrorism. More than 1 million people in Afghanistan, including youth, have disabilities. We need to address their needs and ensure their access to education, employment, and healthcare services immediately. Mr. Chair, my name is Ramiz Bakhtiar, and I was born and raised in a rural village in Afghanistan, where education was out of the way. As a child, I was a shepherd in the midst of war. I grew up in the arms of a wounded country that has been relentlessly beaten for nearly 4 decades. In the face of the ongoing destruction, I still live and work in Afghanistan, but this is not only my story. This is the story of all Afghans. Every Afghan is persistently fighting to free Afghanistan from the shackles of war. In fact, we have shared pains, visions, and ambitions. Our dreams are dedicated to a prosperous Afghanistan, and we are working to be the creators of that bright future in our country. Mr. Chair, youth in Afghanistan have been at the center of many successes in the past 17 years. From media to civil society, private sector, and now we see many young Afghans at the leadership of the government. In 2002, women and girls were almost completely barred from entering educational institutions. Today, more than 9.2 million children are enrolled in schools, of which 39% are girls. 300,000 students are enrolled in public and private universities, including around 100 women. Such investment in education has led to profound social development. Illiterate parents' children became PhD holders. We have also witnessed the emergence of an emboldened generation of activists, teachers, journalists, lawyers, political leaders, and artists who seek to work for a better Afghanistan. Not only do these developments need to be protected, but more importantly, they need to be sustained. Mr. Chair, more than 70% of Afghans are under the age of 30. Youth are the majority in Afghanistan, and their voices need to be amplified. Neglecting such a large sector of our population would inevitably drive the youth towards extremism and radicalism. Therefore, the active participation of youth in social and political processes is a precondition to social development and sustainable peace. Distinguished delegates, as I speak here today, Afghanistan is preparing for its upcoming parliamentary elections. We hope that this election will bring young leaders at the center of decision-making. Thousands of candidates are running for parliament, around 45% of which are youth, and close to 30% are women. Among them is 30 years old Narendra Singh, the only candidate from our Sikh community, who was running for parliament after his father, who was also a candidate for parliamentary elections, was killed by a suicide bomb on July this year. If elected, he will be the first ever elected Sikh parliamentarian in Afghanistan. His candidacy is a clear manifestation of the emergence of a tolerant Afghanistan that is committed to democracy, diversity, and equality. Mr. Chair, to conclude, while we move forward, there are many questions and challenges, but our generation is committed to playing a constructive role in building a democratic society in a country that stands up for human dignity and rights of our most marginalized groups. This future seems distant now, but with meaningful inclusion of youth in decision-making and at all levels, it is still possible. Youth's inclusion is therefore not a choice, but a must. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Afghanistan. I now give the floor to Italy.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Italy aligns itself with the statement made by the European Union and would like to add the following remarks in its national capacity. As the youth delegates of Italy to the UN, we are honored to speak on behalf of 15 million Italian youths. We would like to thank CO-UNA of Italy, the Italian MFA and the Permanent Mission in New York, the National Agency on Youth, and EduActive, together with our universities, L'Orientale of Naples and Alma Mater of Bologna, for providing us with this opportunity. The young people of today will be the leaders of tomorrow. To ensure a positive transition from one generation to the next, greater inclusiveness has to start now. Inclusiveness meaning young people tackling not only youth-related issues, but also addressing any obstacles that prevent us from building a more sustainable and equal world. While Italy has an aging population, it is committed to the inclusion and empowerment of youth, as attested to by its recent establishment of the Youth Delegate program. A growing number of countries have joined this program. Governments recognize the unique value of young people and are eager to expand their involvement in national and international institutions. Italy stresses the need to promote the Youth Delegate program in countries that have not yet established it. Youth delegates epitomize inclusion as a direct link between a nation's youth and other sectors of the population, as well as a bridge between young men and women from different cultural and social backgrounds. Today, sadly, there is still unfair discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, gender, religious belief, and more, also among young people. So, the first question we asked ourselves as youth delegates was simple. Once we have acknowledged that discrimination is real, how can we help Italian and international youth to fight it? The first place to look at is the 2030 Agenda, which is a driver of social development. From poverty reduction to access to health, from quality education to the enjoyment of socioeconomic opportunities, especially starting from those who are left behind.
The Sustainable Development Goals are indeed the core pillars of the Italian development cooperation. By acknowledging the centrality of human beings, both as individuals and as members of a community, the fundamental objectives of Italian development cooperation are eradicating poverty, narrowing inequalities, improving the living conditions of people, and promoting sustainable development, defending and upholding human rights, the dignity of the individual, gender equality, equal opportunities, and the principles of democracy under the rule of law, preventing conflicts, supporting peace building and reconciliation processes, as well as post-conflict stabilization and the consolidation and reinforcement of democratic institutions. Mr. Chair, a core area of Italy's commitment in social development is also promoting the human rights of persons with disabilities, especially mental and intellectual ones, which we consider a defining moment to carry out truly inclusive policies which bridge the arenas of human rights and social development. Inclusion means first and foremost fighting discrimination, and that has to start from education. Italy brings to the foreground evidences that a country where schools and universities promote cooperation, integration, and teamwork is likely to be a nation where cultural and social differences are only seen as means of enrichment, and it is in this spirit that we have put forward our candidacy to the Human Rights Council for the term 2019-21. To frame it in the wider current UN debate, in our view, youth policies represent the best link between the peace and security agenda and the Agenda 2030, in coherence with the view on sustaining peace by Secretary General Guterres. In this spirit, we have been supporting the Office of the Special Envoy on Youth, and we recently allocated $500,000 to DESA for the development of a new project. Encouraging youthful social entrepreneurship would greatly foster such a link, helping young people to guarantee a more stable and sustainable future to the benefit of the society as a whole. Allow us to conclude by stating that ultimately, it is not just up to the youth to get closer to institution, but also to the institution to get closer to youth. We thank you.
I thank Italy. I now give the floor to Singapore.
Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the floor. Singapore aligns itself with the statements of the G77 in China and ASEAN. As is the case in many countries, Singapore's population is aging rapidly. But today, 1 in 7 Singaporeans is aged 65 or older. By 2030, this number will grow to 1 in 4 Singaporeans. These demographic trends require a concerted national effort to ensure that the needs of older persons in Singapore are adequately met. Globally, international action to address similar trends will be critical for the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. The Secretary General in his report, follow-up to the International Year of Older Persons, Second World Assembly on Aging, underscores the importance of providing care services and support to enable older persons to live independently, with dignity and choice, and participate meaningfully in society. This is in fact the approach that Singapore has taken in planning for the needs of our older persons, as set out in our National Action Plan for Successful Aging, launched in 2016. The action plan's focus is on maximizing the opportunities that arise from longevity and to channel the experience and skills of our older adults towards economic and social development. The plan covers all aspects of the needs of older persons, including health, housing, transport, retirement adequacy, protection for vulnerable seniors, as well as social inclusion. Even as we implement the action plan, Singapore has recently taken further measures to strengthen the support network for older persons. First, Singapore has committed to support family caregivers by providing respite services to help them avoid burnout, as their work is often unpaid, unrecognized, and is required round the clock, even as they play a pivotal role in caring for older persons. Caregivers are also encouraged to join caregiver support groups. In addition, a range of community resources is available to them, including training courses on clinical skills and daily care. These provisions will go a long way in supporting caregivers' emotional health and well-being and help them provide better care for the older persons under their charge. Second, while familial caregiving remains a common arrangement in Singapore, the number of older persons living alone is growing. We are thus exploring new models of caregiving beyond the family unit. To this end, we are facilitating aging within communities as a preferred option over institutionalized care. This is in line with the report of the independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons, Ms. Rosa Confeld-Matte, which emphasized the need for older persons to stay in their homes as they age to avoid the physical and psychological disruptions of moving to an unfamiliar place. In 2016, the Singapore government piloted community networks for seniors, which pulls together the efforts of community volunteers, organizations that provide care services, government agencies, and other stakeholders to make sure that seniors' physical and socio-emotional needs are addressed holistically. We intend to expand the initiative nationwide by 2020. Third, Singapore will invest in community nursing to support the shift towards community care. This involves training more nurses to provide post-discharge care and handle complex medical issues. We have also set up active aging hubs in residential neighborhoods to provide a suite of care services, as well as engagement activities, including opportunities to give back through volunteering. These initiatives will empower older persons to remain engaged and active contributors within their communities. Even as Singapore seeks to empower older persons to live independently, we recognize that vulnerable seniors may still need stronger support. The government has therefore introduced safeguards to protect their interests and well-being. We recently passed the Vulnerable Adults Act, which allows the state to intervene as a last resort in cases where an adult is suffering or at risk of abuse, self-neglect, and is assessed to be unable to protect herself or himself. Mr. Chair, older persons have dedicated some of their best years to building up our societies and countries. It is therefore incumbent on us as governments, communities, and families to support them in their golden years and to ensure that they remain meaningfully engaged and active contributors to society and that they are provided sufficient support to age with dignity in their communities. I thank you.
I thank Singapore. I now give the floor to Algeria.
Mr. Chair, at the outset, allow me to congratulate you on your election as chairman of the third committee. I would like also to extend my congratulations to the other bureau's members and assure you of the full cooperation and support of the Algerian delegation. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the African Group and the Group of 77 and China. We thank also the Secretary General for the reports submitted under this agenda and take note of the recommendations contained therein. Mr. Chair, under this agenda item, we regularly discuss issues considered as priorities in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. However, and as it was outlined by the Secretary General in his reports, disparities persist in levels of access to education, health services, safe water, sanitation, and nutrition. And the global inequality continues at very high levels, and the global wealth inequality has been risen. Moreover, the statistics advanced by these reports are source of major concerns. We are still a long way from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Thereupon, my country is calling for the implementation of a true global partnership for development focused on humans' well-being and based on solidarity and real sharing of responsibility. Mr. Chair, the different national development plans occurred since 2000 have enabled my country to achieve before term most of the Millennium Development Goals and to reach a high level in human development, and it further mobilizes today to maintain and improve it. In terms of education, Algeria has adopted a strategy based on two pillars. First, ensuring the full and free access of its citizens to primary and higher education. So we reached a net enrollment rate of 98.5% of children aged 6. The second pillar is combating illiteracy. Since its implementation in 2007, the national strategy against illiteracy has delivered 2.9 million Algerians of illiteracy. The illiteracy rate is currently estimated at 10.16% against 22.3% in 2008. As far as the employment is concerned, my country has established several mechanisms to facilitate access to loans and strengthening investments in various sectors, giving priority to agriculture, industry, and tourism. This policy allowed to stabilize the unemployment rate around 10%. In the area of public health, Algeria is committed to ensure the health coverage for all of its citizens, in particular the vulnerable populations, including by dedicating 18% of its public spending. With regard to the persons with disabilities, my country attaches a great importance to guarantee the right of persons with disabilities to the education, work, and access to health care. Earlier this year, it had presented its experience in dealing with persons with disabilities to the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In accordance with its international commitments and its national legislations, which stipulates that the protection and the preservation of the dignity of older persons constitute a national obligation, my country adopted a set of policies and actions to strengthen the older person's status and ensure their economic and social integration. Mr. Chair, I would like to conclude by wishing a productive and successful session to this committee, and thank you for your kind attention.
I thank Algeria. I now give the floor to Qatar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. السيد الرئيس بداية
Mr. Chairman, at the outset, we would like to align ourselves with the statement delivered on behalf of the G77 and China. Mr. Chairman, the 2030 Qatar National Vision aims to build an effective system for social protection that promotes the civil rights of all citizens, guarantees their effective participation in the development of society, and provides dignity and health to all. We have also put in place the second National Development Strategy for the period 2018-2022, where social protection is a top priority. We have put in place systems and programs for social protection that guarantees a decent life for all citizens, provides them with social care without any discrimination. The role of the state does not end with cash assistance to the most vulnerable categories to confront the demands of day-to-day life. We also strengthen citizens against the risks of poverty. The Qatar Foundation for Social Work is providing social protection services by working with 7 civil society institutions active throughout the state. The state of Qatar implemented its social plans and programs, and we have worked on overcoming obstacles that we have faced for over a year and a half. These obstacles were meant to prevent the state of Qatar from moving forward with its ambitious development plans and carry out its role at the international level. However, Qatari institutions succeeded in providing services to Qatari citizens and residents adversely affected by these inhumane unilateral measures taken against the state of Qatar. The number of beneficiaries of non-Qatari citizens of the states of the blockade reached 1,036 beneficiaries. We have provided family, social, advisory, and rehabilitation services to these individuals affected by these measures. This reflects the commitment of the State of Qatar to human rights and to international humanitarian law. Mr. Chairman, promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities is a top priority of the State of Qatar. We have hosted the 3rd International Doha Conference entitled Blind Women Are a Partner in Building Society and Development, held in May. It addressed obstacles and challenges confronting blind women in development, enhancing the capacities of blind women by providing a supportive and rights-based development approach. Youth as leaders and hope of the future are also the focus of state policies. We have provided them with social care, health care. We have encouraged them to practice sports. We have created job opportunities to the youth. We have also focused on the importance of families. We have sought to address any challenges that impact the structure of families. The National Committee of Human Rights has recorded 646 cases of inhumane unilateral measures against the state of Qatar. Most of these cases involve the separation of family members, and we are worried especially for the most vulnerable categories, especially women, children, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. They have paid the highest cost as a result of these measures. The state of Qatar will continue with its efforts to enhance social development at the national and international levels through the partnership agreements with UN and international institutions which reflect the policies of the state of Qatar to enhance international cooperation and implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and in a way that benefits humanitarian causes. I thank you.
I thank Qatar. I now give the floor to the Holy See.
Mr. Chair, over the past 3 decades, we have witnessed a significant reduction in global poverty, especially extreme poverty. In fact, a new report by the World Bank estimates that nearly half of the countries represented here today now have poverty rates below 3%, a truly remarkable achievement. While the global poverty rate is lower than it ever has been, yet ending poverty in all its forms everywhere by 2030 remains a distant goal. Moreover, even though the global economy continues to grow, social and economic inequalities are still present among countries as well as within them. Indeed, the gap between the haves and have-nots continues to grow, and income inequality remains a defining socio-economic challenge of our time. Thus, answering the question of why poverty persists and why growth and social development are not always inclusive remain crucial to making meaningful progress towards the goals we have set. Mr. Chair, today more than ever, global poverty and inequality are a provocation to which each of us must respond with a firmer sense of collective responsibility and solidarity. They also demand a more holistic response that considers the entire integral human development of the person, as well as the common good of all our brothers and sisters, regardless of their geographic location or cultural identity. In this respect, I would like to focus on 3 segments of society that deserve greater attention and consideration because upon them the future depends. First, the family. In Article 16, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights affirms the family as the natural and fundamental group unit of society. This is because the family is the bedrock of society, forming its children and providing the surest foundation for every individual's social stability and security. For this reason, governments must increase their efforts to guarantee the right of the family to support and care for itself, based on the principle of subsidiarity. This means access to social benefits, especially for low-income households. Without such benefits, many parents are increasingly unable to survive in the global economy, let alone give their children the time and care they need to develop into mature and healthy adults. Similarly, without some support from the state, the family struggles to provide its elderly members and those with disabilities with the help they need to live healthy, happy, and fulfilling lives. When the family is vulnerable, all of society becomes vulnerable. Second, youth. The investment we make in every young person is not just for that person's individual good, but for society as a whole. For youth to realize their full potential, governments must make investments in early childhood and higher education. Meeting the needs of youth is not just a matter of providing jobs, but also of furnishing opportunities to take on leadership roles and responsibilities. Only then will young people become protagonists in their own lives and within society. After all, The young cannot strive to reach their goals if they are not taken seriously and provided with real opportunities to grow, learn, and mature into adulthood. The Synod of Bishops, dedicated to young people, solemnly opened in the Vatican today, is an expression of the pastoral care of the Catholic Church for the youth. Third, persons with disability and the elderly. Many within our society today feel alienated, ignored, and left behind. This is particularly true for those with disabilities and the aged. Pope Francis continually reminds us that even as the world has become global and the economy and communications more unified, for many people, especially the poor, new walls have been built. He proposes a different way, saying, the future of the global world is to live together. That ideal requires a commitment to build bridges, maintain open dialogue, and to continue to encounter one another. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the Holy See. I now give the floor to Bulgaria.
Dear Chair, dear respectful delegates, dear fellow youth delegates, as a person with disability, it's a great honor for me to be here. Youth should be considered as a being more than subject of policies that others design for us. We have crucial role in achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, shaping lasting peace and security, participating in meaningful policies that can develop our world. As Bulgarian youth delegates, we work actively to raise awareness about challenges that young people face by empowering them to develop more sustainable solutions for positive social change. We welcome in a recent nationwide consultation we had with more than 700 young people in Bulgaria, the main priorities they identified were realization of rights to quality education and decent jobs. Unemployment is a global challenge. It affects more than 71 million young people around the world. In many places, growth has not been translated into quality jobs. Young people have problems translating from education to having a decent job and to face with the dynamic change of today's labor market. We would like to share some of our own experience of how entrepreneurship could be a powerful tool to address these challenges and tackling the high levels of youth unemployment. To do this, I'm calling my colleague Yavor Gochev to proceed.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Entrepreneurship can equip young people with valuable skills as critical thinking, decision-making, leadership, and teamwork, as well as problem-solving. Through entrepreneurship, young people can turn major social challenges into solutions powered by innovation, constructing unique careers that resonate outside the typical economic model, and moreover, foster positive community development. We call upon international community and all interested parties to actively support the development of entrepreneurial competencies in formal education systems and empower young people to be creators of quality jobs. Although education and employment are the most important topics identified by the Bulgarian youth, they also call for actions addressing the global environmental issues, improvement of healthcare system, and coordinated response to increased number of illegal substances abuse. Therefore, it is essential that young people engage and influence not only the commonly named youth policies, but all policy areas that affect them. And this could happen if governments and all governmental institutions, financial and educational institutions as well, are proactive and provide support in the process. Dear Chair, we welcome the launch of the UN Youth Strategy, an important milestone in the process of coordinated response of the United Nations and the member states to global challenges young people face today. The United Nations should continue to empower and advance the engagement of young people. Thank you very much.
I thank Bulgaria. Dear delegates, I'm informed that a number of delegations are requesting to speak this afternoon. I wish to recall that delegations may swap sparing slots. However, whenever they request to speak at the subsequent meeting, they will be placed at the bottom of the list and will be given the floor time permitting. This will apply throughout the session. Thank you for your cooperation. I now give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Amos Washington, and I am the Australian Youth Representative to the United Nations for 2018. I am proud to be here representing Australian young people, a diverse and multicultural generation of our vibrant nation. This year, I embarked on a nationwide listening tour, consulting with thousands of young people across the country. I sought to answer the question, what would Australia look like if young people had a greater say? From Albany to Alice Springs, Coober Pedy to Canberra, I spoke with young people from a diverse range of backgrounds and heard about the challenges that they face. This experience is difficult to summarise in this short period of time, but I wanted to reflect on a few key learnings. Firstly, it is crucial that we consider young people as participating members of society. There is a misconception that young people are waiting in the wings, yet to experience the real world. However, the issues the young people raise with me affect people of all ages and are among the many issues that the 2030 Agenda strives to address. I spoke to culturally diverse young people, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young peoples, members of the oldest continuing culture in the world, enduring racial prejudice. I engage with young people experiencing discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. I worked with young people living with disabilities who taught me about the importance of accessible and inclusive spaces. I heard from young people who want safe and affordable housing, secure employment, a fair and equitable justice system, a healthy environment, an education system that encourages young people to thrive, and better support for those suffering from substance abuse. Young people I met advocated for a kinder society, free from bullying and harassment. In this sense, youth issues are community issues, and community issues are youth issues. Young people's experiences and perspectives of these issues are unique and varied, and we cannot get a full picture if we don't listen to these experiences and perspectives. Secondly, it is clear that young people are concerned about the well-being of their generation. Young Australians in educational institutions, community groups, and juvenile detention centres consider mental health to be a crisis point. In consultations, young people saw the interconnections between mental health and other community issues. An education system should emphasise the importance of mental health, and support services should consider the diversity of young people. Young people need to feel valued. The well-being of young people impacts on the rest of the community, and when young people succeed, everyone benefits. Finally, it is important that we include young people in policy decision-making because young people are visionaries. We can enrich our policy conversations if we provide young people with a seat at the table, as young people have nuanced solutions to offer. A young woman from regional South Australia said to me, "If I could influence one thing in my community, I would show that young people are an incredible, diverse group of people who deserve attention and the chance to influence change." We cannot generalise about young people, and when it comes to creating policy, we cannot make assumptions about what young people want and need. Young Australians are members of the global community and are part of the largest generation in world history, a generation of more than 1.8 billion people. 3 years ago, we set the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, an ambitious blueprint for a more prosperous and sustainable world. However, in order to successfully implement the agenda and meet the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to embrace the potential of young people to help shape a better future for all of us. This year, I sought to answer the question, what would Australia look like if young people had a greater say? If young people had a greater say in decision-making and setting our policy agenda, our world would be kinder, safer, and healthier. If young people had a greater say, our world would truly be more united. Thank you.
I thank Australia. I now give the floor to Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to congratulate you, Ambassador Mahmoud Saikal, on your election as the chair of the third committee. Let me assure you of my delegation's full support to you and the Bureau. I also wish to thank the Secretary General for the comprehensive report that was prepared to inform our deliberations on this agenda item. The approach of the Maldives to social development is one that seeks to reduce social and economic inequality. My delegation is pleased to note that the Secretary General's report has highlighted, and I quote, "In Asia and the Pacific, income inequality decreased between the 1990s and the 2010s in 60% of the countries with data, and with sharpest drop occurring in the Maldives, followed by Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, and Georgia," unquote. Such a drop in inequality in the Maldives is the result of the choices that the government has made to ensure that the benefits of economic development are distributed as evenly as possible. The Maldives seeks to ensure that populations in all 188 inhabited islands in the Maldives have access to social protection and services at affordable rates. The Maldives provides free primary and secondary education to all with no discrimination of any kind. The Maldives spends more than 9% of its GDP on the sector, the highest in Southeast Asia region. The Maldives has achieved nearly universal literacy rates, universal immunization, and the lowest infant mortality and maternal mortality rates. The country has eradicated diseases such as polio, measles, malaria, and lymphatic filariasis, although various types of non-communicable diseases are emerging as new challenges. It has been 7 years since the government started providing universal free medical care to every Maldivian in the country. Earlier this year, a new multi-million-dollar private hospital started its services in the Maldives with advanced treatment in non-communicable diseases. The Maldives has established mechanisms to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal employment opportunities and introduced a disability allowance to reduce the financial constraints they face. Our elderly population is getting the compassion and the financial support we owe. through well-targeted policies. The Maldives has remained committed to empowering the youth to be active citizens in the communities who will foster economic and social progress. Particular attention is also given to empower young women and to enact policies that support women's work, ability, and to participate in the economy. The Employment Act of 2008 and the Gender Equality Act of 2016 enshrines into law the principles of equal opportunity and equal outcomes, ensuring non-discrimination in employment and encouraging women's economic empowerment. The social and economic inequality at international levels that the SG's report has examined needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. The small islands developing states is recognized as a special case of sustainable development. Providing social protection and services in SIDS will always be a challenge. The small populations dispersed into hundreds of small islands in vast area of sea makes the delivery of services extremely expensive. Therefore, facilitating easier access to financing for SIDS to enable them to implement social and economic development projects would help to reduce international inequality that the SG has identified. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Maldives. I now give the floor to Zambia. Sorry, Zambia is not here, so I now give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, it is my honor to be here at the United Nations addressing the Third Committee of the General Assembly as a representative of the Republic of Korea's young generation. I feel sincerely privileged to be given this opportunity, especially following Korean boy band BTS' inspirational speech urging young people to speak yourself at the launch of Generation Unlimited. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. A historical document proclaims that everyone, regardless of their identity, ethnicity, gender, age, or social status, deserves fundamental rights, dignity, and aspirations. Yet, many children and adolescents, 70 million displaced persons, older persons, and persons with disabilities are not even aware that they are entitled to such rights. It is fundamental for these marginalized people to have full access to information on their rights and freedom so that they can be aware of what is rightfully theirs and to ensure that no one is left behind in the spirit of 2030 agenda. With this in mind, I would like to share some of my ideas as a youth delegate on how we can best ensure our vision of social development. First, promoting the inclusion of young people through youth empowerment, education, and youth participation in the decision-making processes is crucial. In this regard, I take pride in the fact that my country, the Republic of Korea, is committed to building a more caring and inclusive society and clearly recognizes the importance of the youth voices. The Youth Participation Committee in Korea enables youth to propose policies and participate in the decision-making process under central government agencies and local authorities, reinforcing their competence. Second, states and governments should prioritize gender equality and gender-responsive policies. NGOs in particular should also play a crucial role in addressing the gender gap in employment, work-life balance, and eradication of violence. In this vein, the ROK government is implementing basic plans for gender equality policies and has launched a new initiative called Action with Women and Peace to address the needs of the women and girls in post-conflict situations and amplify relevant discussions. Third, I believe that a robust civil society that is resilient and diversified forms the core of sustainable development and social inclusion. In Korea, civil society activism has played a central role in promoting human rights and democracy over the past decades, with an unwavering struggle to attain the free, fair, and equal life that we enjoy today. They have fought to bring about changes in the perception, role, and social status of excluded people with society, and contributed to tackling inequalities, raising awareness, and ensuring the involvement of every member of society. Last but not least, allow me to conclude my speech by recalling a historical moment that took place last month when the two Korean leaders reaffirmed their commitment to put an end to the past 70 years of hospitalities and move toward peace. On behalf of the 9 million youth in the Republic of Korea, I can confidently say that we strongly desire and deserve peace. We know that given the history of Korean Peninsula, peace cannot be taken for granted. Peace, freedom, and prosperity are fundamental to achieving the socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable future. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that with compassion, we can overcome prejudice, discrimination, and barriers to social inclusion, and make people comfort as inscribed in the Copenhagen Declaration. Only when we combine our utmost efforts and innovative approaches, we will be able to realize our vision for sustainable social development. Finally, I would like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the Third Committee to letting me share my ideas. Thank you.
I thank the Republic of Korea. I now give the floor to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me begin by extending my heartfelt congratulations to you, Mr. Chairman, and other members of the Bureau for your election, and wish you success in leading the committee's work. My delegation also aligns itself with the statement made by Egypt on behalf of G77 and China. Ending poverty in all its forms everywhere and ensuring healthy lives for all at all ages are integral to our common development agenda. These goals are universal, interlinked, and need to be addressed in unison. As also highlighted in the report on the outcome of World Summit for Social Development, there is a need for adopting appropriate mix of policies by states. Meanwhile, the international community and development partners have a responsibility to support national efforts, or at least avoid practicing harmful measures that constitute barriers towards achieving social development goals. Imposition of illegal and inhumane unilateral sanctions are a clear instance of such destructive and harmful practices. They openly and indiscriminately target the daily life of ordinary citizens and are designed to undermine achievements in social development front. Mr. Chairman, the issue of poverty is also highlighted in Article 28 of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. However, persons with disabilities and their households are still more likely to live in poverty owing to various barriers in society, such as discrimination, limited access to education, and employment. Iran is a committed party to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The new comprehensive law for the protection and promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities was just ratified in Iran in April 2018. Besides creating job opportunities for people with disabilities, the government is providing health insurance and a monthly allowance to people with disabilities, while also allocating them 3% of job openings in public sector. Full employment, decent work, and ensuring work-family balance is a major objective of the 20th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. As noted in the relevant report, in Iran, like some countries mentioned in the report, new measures have been designed to promote reconciliation between family and working life, aiming to improve work conditions and facilitate creating more quality time between parents and their children. Furthermore, women employees are entitled to 90 days of paid maternity leave, while men employed at government or public sector are also entitled to a paternity leave. Mr. Chairman, Following the successful hosting of the Regional Forum on Policy Implications of Aging in Tabriz, northwest of Iran, in 2017, and issuance of Tabriz Statement, Iran will host 2018 Biennium Regional Conference on Aging from 23rd to 25th October 2018. The conference will assess the trends in population aging and dynamics, as well as reviewing how communities and governments across Asia have responded to it. Mr. Chairman, literacy is recognized as a foundation for lifelong learning and sustainable development. Despite progress in the field, a substantial number of young people and adults, especially women, have poor literacy skills. Iran recognizes this problem and pursues achieving universal literacy through lifelong learning. In 2017, an event was organized jointly by the Ministry of Education and UNESCO UNICEF local offices in Tehran on out-of-school children to achieve a breakthrough in reducing the number of such children to advance Iran's national education goals as stated in the Fundamental Reform Document of Education and the 6th Five-Year National Development Plan. In closing, Mr. Chairman, we share the view that education is vital to nurture responsible and active stakeholders capable of contributing effectively to peace and prosperity in their respective societies and beyond. However, we underscore the bare fact that unilateral coercive sanctions contributed to a significant erosion of human rights, particularly the right to education, in the countries on which such measures were imposed. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the Islamic Republic of Iran. I now give the floor to Thailand.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, fellow youth delegates, first of all, we would like to express our appreciation to the United Nations and the Royal Thai government for granting us this opportunity to address the General Assembly on behalf of the youth of Thailand. To hear out the thoughts of our generation, this year, we invite the Thai youth to share their concerns and ideas on social development of our country via an online platform. They have inspired us to present this vision before you today. Mr. Chair, let me echo their voices by urging us to put more emphasis on the 3 Ps out of 5 of the People's Agenda. Needless to say that the 5 Ps, people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnership, are equally important and interconnected. Nevertheless, in order to propel and reinforce the ongoing transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies, 3 Ps stand out for us today. First, people. People are the foundation of the society. Empowering people with quality education will lift their quality of life and allow them to contribute more to the society in a positive way. Today, education should not be only for the young anymore. Governments should foster lifelong learning for the development of digital, health, and legal literacy, as well as necessary skills development and training for the labor market for people of all ages and without discrimination. Second, planet. We have to protect natural resources and the environment on land, underwater, and in air for future generations. The unbalanced development of the past has triggered a vicious cycle of natural degradation, climate change, hunger and poverty, and inequality and conflicts. Future societies should be eco-friendly, and stakeholders across the societies should join hands to tackle these cross-cutting issues and to take good care of our planet.
Mr. Chair, let me also add about partnership. You must have heard about the successful operation in rescuing the 13 members of the youth football team, also known as Vibor Academy, from a flooded cave in Chiang Rai province of Thailand. The rescue mission was achieved owing to the incredible effort from those involved, including experts from the government, private sector, civil society, and media, as well as individual volunteers in Thailand and around the world. This incident harnesses different strengths from various players and, more importantly, shows us a strong sense of volunteerism and cooperation and the spirit of humanity and dedication that become a source of inspiration for people all over the world. As youth, we hope to play such constructive roles and build a culture of partnership and volunteerism at home and abroad. We strongly believe that volunteerism can be one of the powerful and cross-cutting means of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. It can enhance interaction between governments and people for concrete and scalable actions and facilitate networking and partnership between governments, civil society, private sector, academia, the media, and the UN system. Mr. Chair, at the UNGA 73rd High-Level Week last week, UNICEF launched Generation Unlimited initiative that calls for solutions and new ideas aimed to get every young person in school, proper training, or age-appropriate employment. Last week, member states also adopted a political declaration on global peace in the honor of the centenary of the birth of Nelson Mandela. The declaration recommends that the UN explore means to consider the needs of present and future generations within its decision-making processes. Mr. Chair, Mr. Mandela once said, "Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. Let your greatness blossom." We are ready to be that great generation. Thank you.
I thank Thailand. I now give the floor to Slovakia. Is the mic, is something wrong? Can we get some assistance? Yeah. I think it's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me introduce and give the floor to the Youth Delegate of Slovakia for the 73rd session, Mr. Dominik Porvažník.
Mr. Chair, fellow delegates, let me first congratulate the United Nations for the launch of new UN Youth 2030 strategy, which can really empower youth across the globe if it is going to be implemented. I would like to speak about one issue which I realized during last week while following the events and speeches of leaders from around the world, which took place here in the United Nations headquarters. I can definitely say that the voice of youth is heard more and more, and the fact that I can now speak here is also a proof of it. However, I also noticed another issue. During the event launching the UN Youth Strategy, one of the honorable guests advised people, don't trust anyone over 30 to make the most important decisions that are going to affect your future. Mr. Chair, I have to say that without intergenerational trust, we will not move forward. Senior leaders do need advice from young leaders and to believe them, but this is true the other way around as well. Young leaders are full of energy, but we also need guidance of senior leaders, and we need moral role models we will be able to follow and believe in. When I was graduating from my high school, one of the professors told me, "Dominik, I am happy that you are full of ideals, but at the same time, I'm afraid that those ideals during your lifetime will be broken by the others." I came to this building last week full of ideals. I was walking in corridors of the United Nations and looking where could I buy the SDG pins for my friends in Slovakia who also became enthusiastic about the SDGs. I found them, but I was disappointed. I was disappointed because besides the 6 pins, I also bought 6 small disposable plastic bags with the pins were packed in. I was disappointed because when I went to the cafeteria to have lunch, meal and fruits were packed in disposable plastic boxes or foil, and I had to use disposable plastic cutlery. In the time when the UN is the most prominent advocate of the SDGs in the world, in the time when it is proved that disposable plastic is causing so much harm to the environment we live in, I started to question whether the UN takes SDGs seriously. In the New Testament of the Bible, we can find the following quote: "Anyone who is trustworthy in little things is trustworthy in great." Mr. Chair, I would like to ask all the people here and around the world, do we take it seriously? I believe we have to be idealists. I believe many of us here are idealists. Isn't the goal of achieving equal opportunities for every human being idealism? Isn't the goal of providing everyone with opportunity to live a full-fledged life where they can strive for their dreams idealism? Isn't the existence of the United Nations bringing together leaders from all around the world idealism? We know that you, the senior leaders, need us, the youth. But I also know that we, enthusiastic youth full of ideals, need you, experienced senior leaders, to make implementations of all the SDGs possible. We need mutual trust and an intergenerational dialogue to make this world a better place for everyone. We need mutual trust to combat the extremism, to combat the apathy towards active citizenship, to combat all the inequalities and challenges we have to face together. Only with mutual trust and with intergenerational cooperation, we can build the world all of us dream of, the world where no one will be left behind. I would like to conclude my statement with one request for you all. During these days, there are thousands of people walking in the corridors of the United Nations. We also belong among these people, walking from one event and meeting to another, grabbing the lunch or coffee and continue running from one meeting and event to another. Please, do stop for a while. Raise your head. Look around how beautiful are the pieces of art in this building. Think about their deeper meaning. But ideally, dedicate 5 minutes of your daily routine to visit the room, which is, in spite of those thousands of people in this building, usually empty. Maybe even you never heard of it. It's the meditation room, also known as a room of quiet. A room dedicated to silence where people could withdraw into themselves, regardless of their faith, creed, or religion. A room dedicated also to those who died in the missions of the United Nations, dedicated to all those who lived according to their ideals of the United Nations, and they took them seriously. And when you will enter this room, ask yourself a question. Do I take it seriously? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Slovakia. I now give the floor to the Czech Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the floor. We are grateful for the opportunity to represent the Czech Republic and its youth in the third committee of the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly. It is of great importance that we make sure that voices of youth are represented and heard at this international forum. It is also an honor to speak on behalf of our country, with a rich history of youth participation in public discourse. Thanks to the efforts of Czech and Slovak youth, we can now celebrate 100 years from the establishment from the first democratic Czechoslovak Republic this October. Czech and Slovak youth was always on the forefront of the resistance and independence movement, advocating ideas of democracy, respect for human rights in 1939, 1968, and in 1989. It is inspiring to follow the footsteps of the young people who made sure that self-determination, human rights, and active political participation are not just vacuous terms, but essential values for the stable democratic society.
We call today for a rigorous involvement of young people in public affairs and for an inclusive, high-quality education. Together, these are necessary for a continually evolving, sustainable society. Accessible, effectively individualized education is key to developing the potential of all young people. Both formal and non-formal forms of education facilitate reasoned, well-intentioned public discourse and promote equitable, consensual decision-making. Drawing upon the reports from the structured dialogue with youth and from previous Czech youth delegates, young people in the Czech Republic demand a significant change of the educational system. They demand a change that would allow for critical thinking and honest debate in schools. They demand a space where they could learn relevant skills for their life and employment. They demand an inclusive educational system that does not discriminate unfairly.
We believe that creating a space for horizontal exchange of knowledge and of diverse experience between the young people from different social and other backgrounds is the precondition for an inclusive, sustainable society where each individual can reach their potential. Emphasizing the importance of the 20th anniversary of the Lisbon Declaration and recalling the UN General Assembly Resolution 72/146, we appeal for recognition of the innovative capacity of young people. We want young people to have equal opportunity to take part into peer-to-peer mentoring, non-formal education, or in interactive youth-focused events. We want them to have the space to openly discuss their project and ideas with a peer who has the experience in the field of interest to make sure that such ideas are never lost. We want them to see that they have the opportunity to succeed in their goals and that the other young people can assist them in changing their lives and their communities.
Therefore, well-rounded education focusing on language acquisition, information processing and personal experiences, as well as intergenerational dialogue that would reduce inequalities in social capital, are all required to secure equal opportunities. Our participation in this forum is only a starting point for a constructive dialogue with Czech youth. This dialogue is vital for a strong democratic civil society, which Václav Havel historically supported. Young Czechs are worried about disinterest in local and national affairs. Making sure that diverse opinions of young people expressed in school parliaments, municipal boards and youth groups and councils are heard and considered enables and empowers young people to become active citizens interested in public affairs. Such efforts are crucial for achieving the goal of effective, accountable and just democratic institutions and for addressing adverse effects of globalization on peripheral areas. In the future, young people will have to adapt to a world with a computerized economy, excess information, and new types of communication. It is our duty to prepare the young generation to tackle these challenges. And we believe that education and participation are an important part of the answer. Thank you.
I thank the Czech Republic. I now give the floor to Libya.
Mr. Chairman, my delegation aligns itself with the statement by Egypt on behalf of the G77 and China and the statement by Morocco on behalf of the African group. Mr. Chairman, our achievements in the area of social development still fall short of ambition because we undergo a difficult transition and lack of political and security stability, which led to economic and financial difficulties. Hence, it makes it difficult for us to achieve social development goals. Nonetheless, within existing resources, the Government of National Accord implements social development goals. We have economic reform programs to improve the living standards of citizens and improve the quality of health and education services, with a special focus on people with special needs and the vulnerable, mainly widows, children, the elderly, persons with disabilities. Hence, we benefited from the UNCRPD and the lessons learned from the convention and the experiences as we serve this bracket of society. We have ratified the convention and we are hence a party thereto. We are satisfied with the level of cooperation with UNICEF and my country towards the promotion of children's rights and providing them with the needed care, health and education services. Also, we coordinate with relevant UN agencies to develop a strategy based on the following. 1. Laying the foundation of good governance based on security and the rule of law. 2. Developing a strategy for post-conflict based on the advancement of different brackets of the society in Libya, including women, children, youth, the elderly, and persons with disability. 3rd, a diversified economy and human development without exclusion. 4, providing humanitarian assistance to those affected by the crisis. The government consults with UNSMIL and we implement the strategy of the UN 2017-2020. Hence, we have 3 priority areas: supporting the work of the government towards development so that we can have accountable institutions. National and subnational institutions must be prepared to provide basic services and contribute towards social cohesion, conflict prevention, and sustainable peace. Enhancing democratic governance, rule of law, and human rights-based development for all. Mr. Chairman, Achieving social development requires addressing inequalities and income disparities between developed and developing countries. This negatively impacts economic development and efforts to end poverty in developing states. Hence, these countries require support to achieve sustainable development. They need mobilization of local resources and a focus on investing in infrastructure and the service sectors that would provide opportunities to implement social development policies. In closing, we reaffirm the importance of the full respect for national sovereignty and human rights within the ethical, religious, and cultural value system, including the right to development and good governance. Each country has a sovereign right to shoulder its responsibilities towards achieving social and economic development. I thank you.
I thank Libya. I now give the floor to Zambia.
Chairperson, I wish to congratulate you on your election as chair of the third committee for this 73rd session of the General Assembly, and to align myself with the statements delivered by the delegations of Egypt on behalf of the G77 and China, and Morocco on behalf of the African group. My delegation would like to acknowledge the reports of the Secretary General under this agenda item and takes note of the recommendations contained therein. Chairperson, poverty eradication continues to be a major challenge for many countries around the world, including my own Zambia. The levels of poverty, though on a declining trend, have remained high in the country, particularly among the vulnerable groups, such as women and persons with disabilities. Poverty levels are even more pronounced in the rural areas of the country at 76.6%, while urban poverty stands at 23.4%. This is despite Zambia having experienced an impressive steady economic growth, averaging 5.8% between 2000 and 2005, and 6.9% between 2006 and 2015. The levels of poverty have remained high in the country, partly due to the over-dependency of the Zambian economy on copper, which has over the years witnessed a steady decline in prices on the international market. This is further exacerbated by the high birth rate and heavy burden of HIV and AIDS, which continues to affect the productive age bracket of the population. As government, we remain committed to and are doing everything possible to uplift the welfare of all Zambians, especially the most vulnerable in society. We recognize the importance of promoting investment in sectors that employ relatively more people, such as agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. In addition, government is implementing various social protection programs targeting vulnerable and incapacitated households, such as older persons, persons with disability, orphans, and vulnerable children, in order to promote human development and dignity for all. In order to promote the rights of older persons to adequate standards of living, government has ensured that all social protection programs are tailored to include the needs and aspirations of older people. The specific social protection programs that target vulnerable and potentially destitute older persons include the Social Cash Transfer Scheme, Food Security Pack, and Farmer Input Support Program, among others. These aim at improving the welfare of all vulnerable groups, including older persons. The Zambian government remains committed to the promotion of fundamental principles and workers' rights at places of work, which include the right to organize, the right to collective bargaining, and the right to equal pay for work of equal value, among others. We recognize that protection of workers' rights is critical to securing decent work. And government, to this effect, is making concerted efforts to ensure that all laws safeguarding workers' rights are fully enforced. As part of our efforts to, on the matter of gender equality, as part of our efforts to address the inequality between boys and girls in accessing secondary school education, financial support is being provided to girls under the Girls Education and Women's Empowerment and Livelihood Project. Government is also implementing the homegrown school feeding program in the country, which provides meals to learners from vulnerable households. In 2018 alone, 956,000 learners benefited from the program, with a target for 2019 at 1.25.
I thank Zambia. I now give the floor to Belgium.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, fellow youth delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for Sarah and I to represent the youth of our country and speak on their behalf. We are very thankful for this rare opportunity to have a voice during discussions on such important matters. Today, we will focus on youth participation and youth as driver of sustainable peace. In an era of World Wide Web, FaceTiming, and high-speed trains, it feels as we reached an epitome of connectedness. Yet today, so many young people feel insecure, vulnerable, and lonely. Education, therefore, needs to be one of the most important tools to empower them, so we can offer them safe spaces to exchange and learn about each other's differences, to promote peace and open their minds to the outside world. In other words, quality education must help young people to find a place in society and prevent them from being easy and vulnerable targets in conflict situations. Mr. Chairman, today, half of the world's population is under the age of 27. Young people should have their equal share in decision-making, especially when it comes to one of the basic human rights, namely the right to live in safety. Youth must therefore be considered as a key actor when it comes to sustainable peace, just like we did with Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. At this very moment, young people are involved in armed conflicts, as victims, direct and indirect, others as instigators, most against their will. In the region where we come from, there is no armed conflict, but we witness other types of violence, such as hate speech, intolerance, discrimination, psychological violence, and extremism. However, we must underscore the involvement of youth as actors of change and peace. I will now give the floor to my colleague, Sarah.
So how do we empower youth to be part of sustainable peace building? By including them in society in a broader sense. Provide them with quality education, healthcare, and basic services in general, but also empowerment. Youth can be empowered in so many ways. Existing initiatives such as youth councils and mentor programs show how important it is to raise awareness among young people on the issues of their communities. But we can go further by encouraging regular consultations of the youth to better understand their needs and priorities. It is an everyday challenge that all of us should take part in. We all have a responsibility. But there's more. Young people themselves also have an important role to play, and we, as youngsters, need to stand up in our everyday lives for our rights and take up our responsibilities. The Belgian youth is involved in many projects, such as youth parliaments and student-led initiatives to help the underprivileged peers. But we, as young people, can only make a change if others are listening and if we are empowered to be actors of our society. Matthew and I have a voice today, but it is a privilege. It is time for new habits, new practices of decision-making in which children and youth have their fair share. We want to see this change, not only at the United Nations, but on every level of governance. Young people don't want to be represented, they want to be present. We recognize the efforts of the UN with the adoptions of Resolutions 2250 and 2419 and urge member states to go further. Lasting peace can only be envisaged when young people are equal partners in the prevention of conflict and the delivery of relief and recovery efforts of any country in this assembly. Do not let these resolutions gather dust on your desks, but let us hand it out, pass it on, and spread the word together. It is time to bring this paper to life. Thank you.
I thank Belgium. We've heard the last speaker on my list for this morning. The committee will continue and conclude its general discussion of agenda item 28 this afternoon at 3 p.m. sharp. And the first three speakers on my list are El Salvador, who will be speaking on behalf of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states. And then we have Estonia and Sri Lanka. Before adjourning, I wish to remind the committee that the deadline for submission of draft proposals under this item is Friday, October the 12th at 1 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.